residential real estate is hard, but it's not that complicated. Like, you just have to look at this thing and go, if I were a renter, would I pay to live here? Or would I pay the same dollar amount to live in this other place? And if the answer is you like the other place better, all your renters are going to feel the same way. So you got to be real careful with this stuff.
I remember flying over from Nashville to New York. You fly over, the route we took was over Cincinnati and Cleveland, and you look down there and you're like, that's an NFL stadium, and what is even left around these places anymore?
If you've ever watched Miami Vice and seen Don Johnson in his all-white outfit with the pink button down and thought, that's the type of real estate operator I want to be, today's episode is going to be for you. We're heading to Riviera Beach. We're going to look at a pretty cool duplex townhome style development where the pricing is going to be too rich for the three of us. But a lot of thought goes into the vibe of the original developer with his white loafers, shirt buttoned to his navel, and big gold frame sunglasses. So, hope you guys enjoy. Welcome in Eric Weatherholtz, Brett Moss, Elliot White, here for another round of marginally useful chaos. We are heading south. We're going down to Florida. Does that sound right, Brett? We're going to look at a deal called Spinnaker Landings. And before we dig into that, I actually have some news for you, gents. I was in the Midwest for work. That's as specific as I'll get because I just don't trust brokers and people who might be listening to sniff out my whereabouts. But I was in America's heartland, and two things stood out to me. One, people in these sort of smaller-ish cities are very quick to tell you when you say, oh, I'm from Boston or from New York or Miami or LA. If you're from a coastal city, they're quick to say, oh, well, we have in Cleveland, it's just like Boston. And I think, well, that's one, that's not true. And two, we don't think about you at all. It was like this really bizarre. A lot of people I met were very quick to tell me why the coastal cities are. It was like this one-way rivalry that I did not know existed.
That's what I was saying.
And it was odd. I heard it from a number of people. Oh, you're from Boston? Oh, well, we have a, and I was like, what? I've never. Okay. Anyway. But that's not the important point. The important point is that I was there with one of those large. I was there with a large fund. We're looking at buying some property together, and so it's a fund that everyone who's listening to this podcast would know quite well. And they said to me, "Hey, we heard your podcast." And I said, "What the fuck are you talking about?" They said, "Real Estate Anonymous. We heard your podcast." And it's the first time out in the wild that I have come across someone who has heard our podcast. And I thought I would share that with you gents and let you know that I think we've made it, right? I mean, Brett, you could just tell your boss to go fuck himself and quit. We're good.
I'm not going to do that today or hopefully ever. But what's funny is you mentioned that after a few calls where people are calling about pricing guidance or details on a certain, people that I had no clue. This started kind of last summer, I would say, where people are like, oh man, we really like your podcast. And I'm like, wait, I'm sorry, what? Like kind of a similar response, Elliot, to where it happened. They were like, oh man, well, like I know Eric or I know Elliot, like you guys are pretty funny. And I was like, wait, this is a thing? Like I didn't know. So here we are.
We'll know we made it, and we'll know we made it when we start seeing an ocean of dirty T-shirts out there.
Yeah, right. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
A whole generation of brokers adopting the wrinkled T-shirt. I went to Cleveland a couple of years ago. It was amazing town of it was, and if you look at the population of Cleveland over the past 50 years, it is so grim.
Yeah.
That, in the 50s, that place rocked, and it's got these fantastic buildings. It looks like, a lot of these look like old New York, and really fantastic urban core. But it's like Cuba, like this shit's all like they're vacant,
right?
And nobody lives there. Right. It's crazy.
Cuba. Oh my God. Holy shit. To the one listener in Cleveland, Lo Siento.
It's bleak. It is is so bleak, and you still have these like really high income suburbs and this downtown that should be like, uh, it's this, the whole thing is like circling the drain. Has been 30 years, 40 years. You live in a place like sunny Florida, and you just it's incomprehensible that there would be less and less and less people there.
Right.
That there wouldn't be new development happening everywhere. And you go to some of these places, Cleveland's kind of the poster child of like, man.
I remember flying over from Nashville to New York. You fly over, the route we took was over Cincinnati and Cleveland, and you look down there and you're like, that's an NFL stadium, and what is even left around these places anymore?
Yeah.
Well, Cincinnati, I wouldn't put in the same.
Yeah, that's true.
The same bucket.
The other thing
that's also amazing because Columbus, great city.
Yeah.
Cincinnati, pretty good city.
Yeah, agreed.
Cleveland, whoa.
Yeah.
Rock and roll.
And everybody I bumped into out there was very nice for the most part. I mean, there's like a relatively even distribution of assholes generally, but everyone I bumped into out in the Midwest, they were friendly people.
That could be a chart. That could be an Elliott chart.
What's the axis? Friendly people.
Yeah, versus geography or something. Yeah, I think there's
or population growth and general demeanor.
Right. There's reputation or stereotypes for a reason. You think of Midwesterners, salty people, and it's true for the most part.
Yeah, I think there's a regression analysis that could be done that does that because they don't have it's not a lot else going on. The other thing, you can buy shit over there. There's people that go to like Youngstown and places like that. You want to buy a small multifamily in Youngstown, 12 cap.
Just like to build a rent deal in Savannah.
You're buying it at 12, hoping to sell it at 15.
Selling it at 11.
Yeah, so you make your money.
15.
It's like make your money while you own it. Maybe get your money back at the end.
Yeah.
The only dumber business
Which actually,
is the people who
they can be. It's not a bad deal if you're. If you think about. It's just a totally different way of thinking about it.
Well, boys, let's go to Florida. Let's go to Brett's backyard. Brett's excited that DeSantis is getting rid of his property taxes. I'm sure you've already done a few BOVs where people say, what if this happens? What's my deal worth? And your response is like, just you do the math, dummy. Like, what do you mean?
I'm not sure.
So we're going to, Brett, why don't you tell our three listeners where we're headed?
And please call us for the three people listening to let us know at least it was three people listening, one of us, about something or the other.
Call in. We'll give you Eric's cell phone number.
Whenever I see something like this, what is this, 1990, South Florida, walk-up apartments with the name Spinnaker Landing, like my mind, I picture the developer that came up with this name, and I'm seeing a guy, a silver-haired gent with white loafers.
For sure. Yep.
That had with a Cadillac and a gold Rolex.
He's got a shirt buttoned just to his navel,
with a sweater wrapped around his neck. Even in July.
Yeah.
All right, let's get into it.
So so as Eric mentioned, 123 units, 1990 vintage in Riviera Beach, which is I think just a little bit north of Palm Beach, kind of West Palm Beach. And so, I think this type of vintage deal works. I think Eric touched on a very important dynamic for, Southeast Florida, this kind of wood frame surface parked product, which i.e. is no parking garage, which is just hard to do based on some zoning stuff down there. And, big announcement over the weekend from Stephen Ross, who's the guy that started Related Group and owned, or maybe still owns the Dolphins, about spending basically $1 gajillion in West Palm Beach on the other side of 95 from where all the super, super wealthy people live. And anytime a billionaire says he says, "I want you to know, Mr. Mayor, I'm spending money in your city like a drunken sailor." It's one thing to be a drunken sailor spending money. It's another thing to be a billionaire acting like a drunken sailor spending money. So I think this pocket of town, this pocket of the state, kind of heading north or west and north from Palm Beach, is going to be a huge point of growth, or a huge region for new growth from affordability, just quality of life, blah, 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 blah. Enough of my broker spiel.
All right. So the fundamental question that I always ask when it comes to multifamily is, do I know why people want to live here? I think that's pretty obvious, right? We don't need to spend too much time on that one. It's a great market in Florida. It all sort of tracks why you'd want to live here. I think the next question then is, do we understand why people would want to live in this apartment complex? And there's two ways to look at this. First is, I always think one of your best amenities is price. And so just making sure that, are we buying this and doing a value add deal? I know that that's being pitched, but every broker in the history of our country has always pitched value add on everything.
That's right.
Do you actually think that there's a value add story? And if you do, what does that look like? Or maybe not. Maybe you just think, we're going to buy it. We'll have some money for turning a few units, and we like the rent growth story. So, Brett, if you're buying this thing, you think there's a real value add story here, or is this just real estate that you're going to be happy you own in 10 years?
I think it's a combination of both. I mean, let's take a look at, we don't have very many interior shots here, but I mean, just by this picture in and of itself, it would lead you to believe there's somebody that could come in and take a fresh look at this and generate some additional income. But I think with some of I'm a big fan of the masses versus the classes play today. And so rents of $1,900 seem like a lot, but if you're coming from Miami or even West Palm Beach, or Palm Beach or or Fort Lauderdale, I mean, this is a value proposition of the rest of the market, which I think is a good play with where we are in the macroeconomic cycle. Whatever.
I like the open land. Describe what we're looking at, Brett, but it's sort of
so you've got
man kind of apartment, scattered single building, 2-story walk-ups. And at the end of the main entry road is a little bit of land that looks like you could add 7 or 8 more units.
Or a pickleball court. When in doubt, go with pickleball court today. And so I think one of the other, so you've got 5-unit buildings. I don't know how many of them there, but it almost kind of feels like a duplex type deal. And I think these floor plans were 1,000+ square feet on average, which I like that. And then you've got newer product being developed adjacent. I don't really know what that is, but anytime you're seeing new development adjacent to, your community, that's a good thing. Growth is a good thing if managed correctly.
Brett, you're right. These are all duplex. I'm on their website, and they have their floor plans up there. At least for what I can see, they don't have a floor plan for the 1 beds, but for the 2 beds, the 3 beds, and they even have 4 beds. And demand for 4 beds is nearly inelastic. They're really, really hard to find.
Right.
But again, in this kind of workforce product, it's not inelastic on the really high end. So, but interesting unit types for sure. It does look like it's duplexes. There seems to be a range of finish. What I can see in this photo here looks like white appliances, Formica countertops, older cabinets with just some hardware put on. But then on their website, they do have a photo showing granite and some kind of shaker cabinets. And so maybe there's some range of finishes. And I guess if I were looking at this deal, I'd want to understand, okay, you've renovated a few units. What are they renting for? Because the brokers are going to tell you spend 10 grand to get $200 to get a 24% return on cost. But maybe that's not true. Maybe people don't want that. Maybe people are happy to pay for the classic unit, but once you upgrade, there might be more options at that upgraded price. So that's where I start to get a little jumpy with this older stuff, is you don't want to price it too close to property that's clearly better.
Right. But that is the broker pitch.
That is an interesting wrinkle in real estate. It's always about, how do I charge more? You rarely see people, there's a handful of guys that I know that are in this world of, how can I charge less?
Yeah. Yep.
You know, and I think the trick is that these, in a market like this, generally one of the most dynamic markets in the United States, to be able to buy something like this, it's going to be full no matter, at the existing rates. You gotta, to be competitive in buying it, you gotta raise the rent. And I think this is one of those kind of properties where the people that are your target audience really aren't that keen on raised rents.
Yeah.
And there's a gazillion uh, apartments in this part of the world that are nicer and always will be nicer that you can spend more money on. So the core value of something like this is price. I just don't buy into the idea of doing something that's going to take a goofy 1990s product, put a little lipstick on it so that you can stick it to somebody that probably doesn't have the capacity or interest in paying more.
I agree with you. I mean, if I were going to buy something like this, my approach would be, I'm going to make sure I have enough money in capital reserves so that I can do a nice turn when someone moves out. I can maybe add a few, nicer fixtures, or you make it a little bit nicer and maybe you see kind of a $20 pop on your renewal rent. But the idea of coming back in and really trying to dress up these interiors, I mean, you still have galley kitchens, you probably still have a lower ceiling height. There's some things about it that you aren't going to change. And residential real estate is hard, but it's not that fucking complicated. Like, you just have to look at this thing and go, if I were a renter, would I pay to live here? Or would I pay the same dollar amount to live in this other place? And if the answer is you like the other place better, all your renters are going to feel the same way. So you got to be real careful with this stuff.
Yeah, and then I think as Eric was touching on too, when the buyer of this will be somebody who convinces themselves they can spend 10 grand or more and get a higher return, right? But then the counterintuitive part of that is you don't want to do all the units because you have to sell the dream to the next buyer, if that makes sense.
Well,
so they're pitching all the units, which is again counterintuitive, I think, to a lot of people.
They're saying it's 20 vacant units right here. It's 84% occupied. And the first question I would have is, well, why? This seems like a pretty in-demand market. So what is it? And odds are it's your rent. And so if you're in a property that's struggling and your pitch is you're going to increase the rent to fill it up, that seems like, I mean, I'm not the smartest guy here, but that seems like a pretty stupid fucking pitch to me.
Well, we haven't sold them all. Let's raise the price.
Right.
I would say don't do that. But in just like kind of pulling up some rental comps, and I have no idea how comparable these are, but a lot of smaller units, so we talk a lot about per square foot rents if you're a real estate nerd. I think to the consumer or the resident, it's just how much is my rent every month.
Yeah, right? How much is my rent?
Is that a fair comment, Elliot?
Yeah, when people start digging too much into rent per square foot, I think you're an analyst and you've never operated a property.
Right. So it's kind of
like it sort of matters, but doesn't really matter. Residents aren't doing that math. They'll tell you like this 650 square foot one bed feels smaller than the one that's 900 square feet. And they're right. And at that disparity, yeah, sure, that matters. But the difference between a 670 square foot and a 740 square foot, renters don't think about that. They're just looking like, well, what's my rent? Especially at this renter is not running the per square foot numbers.
Right. And so, just looking at some third-party services here, I mean, average square footage significantly smaller than Spinnaker Landings, and the rents are all, I mean, it is interesting. I mean, it's units ranging from 700 square feet to 1,000, and the rents are all the same. Like all like $2,000, or it appears like the vast majority of them are 1,850 to 2,000 or 2,100. So, I mean, I think, and again, the broker is going to pitch your operational upside, right? I mean, this current owner doesn't know how to run this property.
Yeah, right.
Better job.
Seller hates money, but smart guy like you, yeah,
you can figure it out.
I'm out.
Yeah, right. Eric's out. Boy, this one started with a lot of promise too, because I like the location. So I think if you're gonna offer on this one, it's if today's rent is tomorrow's rent plus or minus $20. and I'm comfortable with the capital. And at 1990s, you got to make sure, all your major systems, you're going to want to make sure you've addressed that. But if you're comfortable with the capital, you believe that today's rent is tomorrow's rent, you think you can lease it up, which is probably not incorrect. You might be able to lease it up. I would believe that story. Then where do you end up on a price? And know that you're not going to love your going in yield, but it's going to be real estate I think you'll be happy to own as long as you didn't peg to rents that aren't achievable. That path, that way lies madness.
Yep. The happiest owner for this thing is the guy with the Cadillac and white loafers that developed it. Yeah. And imagine being that person, owning this thing 35 years later. You probably paid off 2 mortgages.
For sure.
Well, so I'll drop this tidbit as we wrap up here. I did look this up. This property was purchased in April of 2013. So I'm guessing kind of a holdover from the GFC, kind of, all right, fine, we maybe need to get rid of this. The current owner bought this deal in April of 2013, which feels like a make-believe number, for $32,000 a unit.
Nice.
And they're currently asking $200,000. Just at Eric's point, lots more loafers and lots more Cadillacs.
Yep. that definitely sounds right. One note is that the nicer apartment complex that is next door that you can see from the aerials appears to be affordable housing.
Okay.
I think it was a recent development. Yeah, it is. Yep. The Riviera Beach Housing Authority has an office there. So nice new product next door. And I think you just got to be careful with your rent here. That's all.
Yeah, I think this deal is going to get a ton of interest, without a doubt. Yeah, but I'm not buying with this deal. It's going to get a lot of offers, but I'm not buying into the value add story at 84% occupancy.
No, and my only closing thought on this one, and you can see it in the OM and on the landing page, brokers are starting to have to put a price on stuff because buyers are finally saying, like, the immediate response now when anyone sends me a deal, I just reply back price with a question mark. It's like, let me know if you're going to waste my fucking time or not. Right? And so I won't even look at your deal. There's too much stuff out there. I'm not going to do it, So maybe the tides are shifting and sellers are going to have to start putting a number on things. All right. So I'm not a buyer. I don't think. Brett, you a buyer?
I'm out. I'm not fully in on the business plan here, but I think this will get a lot of offers. Somebody's going to be the buyer here.
Yeah, that sounds like Eric is out though. Again, listeners, if you want to put in an offer on Healy Weatherholt's letterhead, I think that's fine.
Yeah, it's A-okay.
Yeah,
we'll give you Eric's cell phone number too on the next episode.
Yeah.
All
right, Jim.
No bell this week.
No bell.
But this was fun.
This was the Nobel Prize.